Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on Awabakal country. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land.
I've learnt everybody you speak to is fighting an invisible battle with something. You don't necessarily know what that is. So I always approach an interview with humility, and I want to give each person the opportunity and the space to tell their story.
Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journeys to publication. If you are looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. You can find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. We will discuss mild spoilers ahead, so I recommend you grab yourself a copy of the book now, or at least very soon. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening with us and supporting the Australian book industry, and if you enjoy the show, hit us with a review, a rating, or a thumbs up wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, this episode is brought to you by Podpixels, the ultimate storytelling tool for passionate podcasters. More on them later in the show. Welcome all to a special episode, and it is a special episode of Date with a Debut. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show. You know who I am, and I am here on Warren, my country. And for today's episode, we're doing a first ever collaboration episode with another podcast. I am a massive lover of book podcasts as well as of books, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And today I have one of my absolute favorite podcasters here on the show. I'm joined by friend and fellow book lover and spruiker of the airwaves, the host of Talking Aussie Books, Claudine Tinellis. Claudine, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Nick. It's wonderful to be here. If
you don't know, Claudine, she hosts Talking Aussie Books, which I've been a fan of for many, many years. It is so lovely to have you here. You can check it out as well in the description. But on top of it, you've been involved with Northern Beaches Writers Festival. You've been a judge for the Newcastle Short Story Award among your many achievements. And one of the things I really want to ask you about is you're about to dive into the world of writing, aren't you? Because you've had a manuscript which is called The Pact to earn second place at Hawkeye Publishing Manuscript Development Prize, which was just last month. So we'll say you're busy. You've been taking care of business. Plenty of stuff going on.
I have been busy, Nick, and it's all been wonderful. Everything that has followed on from being the host of this podcast has opened up so many incredible opportunities for me. Being involved in literary festivals is just one of them, and judging, short story prizes. I mean, I'm involved in one now for the Words Out West Festival. I'm judging their short story prize, both in the adult and youth category at the moment. And finding time to write in between all of that has kept me busy. I mean, The Pact is not my first manuscript, I've got to say. We were just talking about Matt Rogers and Matthew Riley a little bit earlier and off air, so to speak. But, I think it's just de rigueur for writers to be, producing manuscripts that may not necessarily see the light of day. This is probably my 6th or 7th adult manuscript. I think I've lost count. There's quite a few in the drawer. But it has been wonderful to see The Pact find a receptive audience, and getting runner-up in the Hawkeye Manuscript Development Prize last month has just been incredible, and I'm so excited to see where this manuscript goes.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about it soon, but for everyone listening, we're going to kind of take a different approach to normal episodes, because we want to talk about not just, debut authors, but also the challenges of getting published, but where we see authors, debut authors in the publishing world kind of sitting in 2026, which sounds like a gargantuan conversation, but we will do our best because, we doing the shows we do, we are lucky to kind of see the different authors coming through our door every week. But of course, let's start off by giving you your flowers, Claudine, because, for those who are not familiar, which I would be surprised if there isn't, Talking Aussie Books, one of the longest book podcasts that's been out there, I think over 320 episodes at the time of us recording. I tip my hat to you. Nearly a decade of amazing interviews. I've got to just ask off the bat, how the hell did that happen?
It is. I don't know if I ever told you this story before, Nick, but it was really one of the most impulsive things I've ever done. But essentially, as I just mentioned, I've been writing for quite some time. But I think at that stage of my life, I think I'd been out of the law for some time, and I just decided I wasn't going to go back to being a lawyer, and I'd always wanted to try my hand at writing. I think even when I was a lawyer, I always put up my hand for those tasks that were, write an article for this, scholarly magazine, or this, practice update or whatever. And I'd always be saying, yes, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I think there was some kind of lure of having my name on the byline that really, really appealed to me. And anyway, so, fast forward, I'm, at home looking after 3 children, doing school runs and looking after elderly parents. And in the cracks of time, I, was trying to write a novel. I was very unsuccessful in those early days. It just wasn't working for me, and so I did a masterclass in commercial fiction, which many listeners may have heard of. It's the Fiona McIntosh Commercial Fiction Masterclass, which she runs out of Adelaide. I did that in 2017, and that was a wonderful introduction to writing commercial fiction. It was the wake-up call I needed. I knew I needed to learn a lot more. And in that, in furtherance of that objective, I started listening to podcasts. Now, at that stage, 2017, 2018, early 2018, I would say, podcasts were really new to me. I didn't really know much about them, but everybody started talking about podcasts, and there were a few terrific Australian ones around at the time. But I found that I wasn't getting the information I wanted from those podcasts. And essentially, I wanted to hear from Australian authors about how they got their start, where they get their ideas from, how do they go about getting a publishing deal. And I knew a few Australian authors by that stage. I'd made a number of connections through the Fiona McIntosh Commercial Fiction Masterclass. We all get tipped into a Facebook alumni group once you finish the masterclass. And so, I started to see that there were some familiar names in there, people who were already published and people who, were already successful. And so I decided that I would reach out. Oh, no, go back a step. I knew that I knew these people. And so when I just realized that I wasn't getting the information I wanted from podcasts that were already in existence, I decided to start my own. And it was like a really split second random decision. I was just going to, I'll start my own podcast. And so that's really how it was. I knew a couple of people. I approached them and I said, look, I'm thinking of doing this. I have no idea if anyone's going to listen. Would you be prepared to talk to me? Everyone I approached was, yeah, of course, no problem. And it just went from there. It honestly and it was just, the more people I spoke to, the more people I was introduced to, my circle grew wider, my network grew wider, and I started to, just to get to know more people. And then in 2020, everybody knew what happened in 2020. And suddenly we had all these authors who had no way of, reaching their readers. Bookshops were closed, libraries were closed, events were shut down. Nobody could do any events. And suddenly I was in a position where I had a platform and people needed a way to reach their readers. And so I think 2019 was a really good year for me. I got to interview people like Trent Dalton. I got to interview Holly Ringland. I got to interview Jane Harper, or it might have, been sort of in the lead up to 2020 as well. And I think people just started going, I think she knows what she's doing. Yeah. Why don't we reach out and talk to her? So 2020, 2021, 2022, the podcast really kind of exploded from there. And so I think a bit like you, Nick, when you see that there's a demand and that people, publishers want a way to be able to help promote their authors want a way to help, to promote their books, to reach their audiences. There is a demand there. And as long as there is a demand, I've been able to keep going with doing what I'm doing. And I find myself, like you say, 320 episodes and counting.
Which is so cool. It's such a cool milestone. And I love that you kind of discovered a need. And I also love the fact, first of all, that it was a split-second decision that is now 10 years old. And then, second of all, that, of course, I will say, we love chatting to the authors. We love doing it. But let's not lie, we're also doing market research for our own writing. And we are absolutely, the amount of times I've said to authors on a podcast, I'm going to have to steal some of this because like some of your ideas are brilliant. It is absolutely true that actually starting a podcast and talking with authors and how they did their creative process has been incredibly helpful for me. And I'd imagine it's the same for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been incredibly helpful. I would say that it has opened my eyes to the difficulty and the difficulty of getting published in a lot of ways, and also the work that's required. It's hard, and I think there's no getting away from the fact that you've just got to put your bum on that seat. You've got to glue your bum there and get the work done. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've had from speaking to all the authors that I have over the last however many years. Yeah.
Absolutely. And God, it's opened some doors for you. As you kind of alluded to, you've been able to work covering festivals, judging events. You're now, of course, yourself diving into writing. I mean, it's a great way also to keep in touch with the pulse of the industry as well, because there's so many different publishing houses and things going on. There's things happening in different parts of the world that find their way here. And it's also shown, doing shows like this has shown me where Australia really sits and that we actually command a lot of, the voice that we actually have. People are really interested in what Australian readers have to say. And it's not a surprise that so many of those books go overseas and do really, really well. Out of curiosity, and it's a question I love to ask, authors about, at the end of talking about their book, but it's a great opportunity to do this with a fellow podcaster. What is actually doing the show? First of all, what has it given you, and what did the exercise of doing this show teach you? Be it Claudine the human, Claudine the writer, Claudine the podcaster, the human on this planet.
What the show has given me has been an incredible network of people that I now am lucky enough to call friends. That's the reality. I came into the industry, I went into that Fiona McIntosh commercial fiction masterclass not really knowing anybody, not really knowing anyone in the industry, feeling really rather like, a shag on a rock. I honestly didn't. I just thought I'm not even really sure I'm in the right place here, and I'm not even really sure if anything I do will ever succeed. And I came away from that masterclass with a group of people who were kind of, in a similar position that I am. Some of us were a little bit further along in our journey than others, and it just sort of created that camaraderie. And then starting the podcast and getting to know all these wonderful people, I think has really just given me this incredible network. I can't describe it in any other way. There's rarely a place that I go to that I don't know people. I haven't interviewed somebody in that sort of crowd of people, and people remember me. People, will always come up and say hello to me. And, I remember when we chatted for the podcast, and, that was my first podcast. We were talking about this earlier. I interviewed a lot of people, and it was their first time talking on a podcast, and so their experience with me was quite memorable just for that fact alone. And so I have met publishers, I've met agents, network and community, and I think that's the biggest thing for me. It has given me this community of people. I used to drag my husband along to all these events that I wanted to go to, and I was too mortified to go by myself, and I used to say, please just come with me, I don't want to walk into this room on my own. And now I very rarely have to walk into a room on my own. There's always somebody that I know is going to some event that I'm going to, and we inevitably will meet up and, maybe go for dinner afterwards or have a drink beforehand. And I really love that. And so that's the biggest thing that the podcast has given me. In terms of what I've learnt from the podcast, I've learnt patience. I've learnt that everybody you speak to is fighting an invisible battle with something. And you don't necessarily know what that is. It could be anxiety. It could be crippling anxiety. It could be lack of self-confidence or just, terrible experiences that they've been able to put on the page, vulnerability. So I always approach an interview thinking I might know, I know a lot about the author because I've had to do my research and I've read the book, and oftentimes that person's heart and that person's feelings and souls are imbued on the page, in the words on the page of that beautiful book that it's found its way into the world. And so I do approach each interview, I hope, with sensitivity, with patience, with humility, and I want to give each person the opportunity and the space to tell their story in a way that feels comfortable for them. And that requires me to be patient. It requires me to listen and not just, go out there and ask my questions, bang, 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 get that done. I need to give that process time and respect. And I think that's what I've learnt most of all, that everybody has their own story and everybody brings a different experience to sitting there at that moment and about to talk to me.
That is a fantastic answer to that question. And it's, I think, yes, a great point, the value of listening, which I think is, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of amazing things life skills that you can take on beyond that. And it's wonderful that the podcast and this exercise has given you that, which is amazing. And I will also add, let's talk about it now, that in addition to that, it's finally meant that you have completed a manuscript, which was a runner-up at with the Hawkeye Publishing Manuscript Award. I'm so excited to hear about the Pact. I know nothing. All I have is the name. Please tell me how things are going. Like, will we see a book? And if we do see a book, I would love to just ask for an elevator pitch. I would love to hear more.
I'm actually really gun shy about talking about it, Nick. And the reason is because it's currently out on submission. And so I'm a little bit nervous about talking about it because I kind of don't want to jinx myself.
Fair.
But what I can say is that after so many manuscripts that haven't, either gone anywhere, done well, been rejected, and like so many authors I'm sure that you've spoken to, writing comes with a level of expectation in terms of rejections. And so I've had my fair share of rejections. But in 2023, I wrote another manuscript called The Forgotten. And that manuscript came out of COVID experiences of doing a lockdown walk in my local area, and I stumbled upon an old cemetery and, thought, what's this cemetery all about? And what if there was somebody, it's an old sort of abandoned cemetery. And anyway, not to talk about that manuscript more than necessary, but essentially that manuscript landed me an agent. And I was extremely excited about that because I thought, this is what I need. I need somebody who can dispassionately and sort of act for me at arm's length, because I think people in our situation, we know so many people, and I know a lot of publishers. I know a lot about what goes on in the publishing industry. Talking to publicists within publishers a lot of the time, and so I felt like I felt like I didn't have that sort of arm's length sort of relationship with them that was necessary for me to be able to advocate for myself in these scenarios. And so I thought an agent was the best way for me to go. And so I was very grateful and very happy to have landed an agent in 2024. Sadly, that manuscript that went out on submission didn't actually go anywhere. And call it timing, call it sort of bad luck, whatever, or, maybe the story just wasn't for any of those publishers for whatever reason. I decided I wasn't going to wait around. I just needed to move on and work on another manuscript. So I started, and I'm very much like that. if I feel like something's not going very well, I just go, okay, that's it. I'm just going to draw a line under that and just move on to the next project. So, and I guess that's probably why I've got so many manuscripts in my drawer. So I'm always writing, despite the fact that I'm podcasting and doing all these other things. I am always writing. Anyway, so 2024 sort of came and went, and the beginning of 2025 came, and my daughter, my youngest child, who was 18 at the time, accepted a university offer in Canberra and was moving out of home. I live in Sydney, and I thought I was going to be the parent that was going to push my kids out the door. Like, yep, you're 18, see you later, kid. I've got other things going on. But it came as a great surprise to me, as I'm sure, my family as well, that I was not okay with this decision of my daughter's to move. I was happy for her, and I was delighted that she was following her dreams and her passion. But I, in my private moments, felt quite a lot of grief around this. And I struggled to come to terms with the fact that she was my youngest and she was my only daughter, and suddenly she was no longer at home. And the idea for the pact came to me in that moment. I saw my opening scene, and the opening scene was my character, whose name is Rita, fussing around in her daughter's dorm room and helping her pack all these things away, and the moment where she needs to sort of gather her courage and say goodbye to her daughter and drive 3 hours back home to Sydney. And essentially, that's the story. The story is about this woman who is grieving the end of her parenting years. She's suddenly an empty nester, which I'm not. So this isn't my story, but it served as a springboard for the story that I wanted to tell about this mother grieving the loss of, those motherhood years, coming to terms with who she was as a person, how she moves forward with her life, and what does that look like. And in the process, I explore things like cultural identity. I explore her relationship with religion, and also, her as a sexual being. She was a single mother and she raised this child on her own. And who does she become? Does she want a partner? Does she want to, find love and happiness after all this time of being on her own, or is she happy on her own? I don't know. So these were all the things that I wanted to explore in this story without giving you the actual storyline. I hope I've given you enough to go on.
You have given me so much to go on, and that book sounds incredible. I think also it highlights a quiet moment of having to say goodbye to a child when they're a grown adult and they go and become their own person, which is a very hard thing to do. I still remember when I went off on gap year, the hug that my mum gave me before she went off to the airport. Like, I still remember it. Like, it was a different sort of hug. It was a sort of hug that had a lot of emotion behind it, and I still remember it. Like, so that sounds like a book that should be out there in the world, and I'm crossing all the fingers and all the toes that this time it is successful. And if it is, you're coming back on the show. We'll just say that. You're coming back on the show and we're going to talk about it in more detail, which I really am excited for. But I hope it does, and I'm so excited to continue listening to Talking Aussie Books and all the amazing other episodes that you'll have coming down the pipeline.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. And just picking up on that point about you remembering that hug, I think the other thing that was interesting to me about writing the pack was I got married at 23, and I, lived at home right up until the day I got married. And I remember my parents struggling to come to terms with the fact that their oldest child was no longer under their roof. And, I never gave my parents a thought when I left. Do you know what I mean? And I think now I look back on that and I think, oh, that was so cruel. I was so cruel to them about it. I was so, I just sort of trotted off, bye-bye, ta-ta, see you later, and didn't give them a thought about, how they might be feeling. But now I can, with the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of maturity and 3 kids, I can definitely see that, it is a moment for grief. Of course, every parent is happy for their children to move on and become independent adults, but there's always just that little piece of your heart that sort of, can never come back to you once they're gone.
Absolutely. And this is another reason why I'm really hoping this book is successful, because it sounds like a very interesting and juicy subject matter to examine and dissect. Ad break time. Stop the podcast. Hey everyone, just thought I'd stop to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Podpixels, the Trent Dalton of professional podcast platforms. Question: do you have a desire for a great podcast? How are you going to build it? What about the design work? Won't it cost a fortune? Fear not, for Podpixels is a simple, done-for-you website service built specifically for podcasts. They are here to deliver that professional look to your podcast, to make it easier for listeners to find your show, and all for one great monthly price. From hobbyists to pros, Podpixels has you covered. Their team provides domains, website hosting, backup, security, and support, handling the full setup and making sure that your show is up to date and allowing you to focus on what you do best, podcast. With Podpixels, you can achieve your full podcasting vision. They are the ultimate one-stop solution for anyone looking to build an online home for their podcast. Check them out below in the show notes and tell them that Nick from Date with a Debut sent you. Thank you, Podpixels, for sponsoring the show. As part of one of the joys of us kind of doing this cool collaboration, we're going to bounce back and forth in terms of, the format that Claudine does with her show, and of course with me with Date with the Debut. And of course, being book podcasts, we have to recommend some books. Like, we absolutely do. So we've gone out and we've said to each other, as long as it's a debut, given following the theme, this is a books that we're going to recommend. So we've brought 2 books along with us that we're going to talk about. And I think the best place to start is with you, Claudine. What books have you been reading and that you've brought along today?
Well, as you know, Nick, always reading some fantastic Australian books. But one that really stood out to me was one that I read out at the end of last year. And it was a book by Rebecca Armitage. Now, Rebecca is an ABC journalist who is based in Hobart in Tasmania. And her debut novel, The Heir Apparent, I absolutely devoured this book. And I was very lucky to have been able to interview Rebecca for both the podcast and an event down on the New South Wales South Coast. Now, this book basically follows a 29-year-old doctor by the name of Lexi. She's working in Hobart in a hospital, and I think when it opens, she's just about to kiss her best friend, who I believe is a farmer, and a helicopter comes into view, and this helicopter is essentially a member of the British royal family, or an aide to the British royal family, has come to collect her because there's been a tragic accident. Her brother, the prince, and her father, the king, have both been killed in a tragic accident, and she is next in line to the throne. So she's picked up, she's whisked away, and essentially she is been given a year to decide whether or not she is going to take up the baton and become the next Queen of England. And it is the most incredible story. And it was also very incredible. It is also incredible because it was named the Reese's Book Club pick of December 2025. And that in itself just sort of catapulted this book into the stratosphere of book fame. So it was published in the UK and I think in America and here. And guys, if anyone is a fan of the royal family, or not, even if you're not a fan of the royal family, but you're a fan of all that sort of like the machinations and want to understand all the sort of, the juicy details behind the scenes, Rebecca is very well informed. She has written about the royal family in the past. She's covered, royal weddings and I think even the Queen's funeral, I think. So she's very well versed in all of these sort of details, and it is a cracker of a read.
This is the book of all the ones that we're going to talk about today that I don't know anything about. Like, I do know about Rebecca, and I also knew that this book was in Reese's Book Club because, it's whenever a book like that comes out, it makes a big splash in the literary world. But I need to check that out because I didn't know anything about it until you just pitched it to me. So it's now going to add this to my TBR pile that's taller than my house. So it feels Like you've sold me on this one. I mean, there's so many good journos on the ABC that have actually put out a couple of books. I mean, spoke with Michael Bressenden did one relatively recently as well. But yeah, no, I mean, it sounds great, particularly like all the intricacies. Like I'd imagine, my mind immediately went to The Crown because I've watched The Crown plenty of times, and how much detail that they have in there and all the protocols and elements of that, and also how restrictive that would be. That sounds like a fascinating premise.
A cracking read, absolutely. Even if, like I said, even if you aren't like a particularly, avid fan of the royal family, or you're a Republican, I think it's fascinating reading, irrespective.
Absolutely. My first book is one that you've had this author on your show as well as I have. So this has been one of my favorite books of the year so far, and that is When the Party's Over by Katie Hoskins. And it is a fantastic deep dive into friendships, parenting, lying, the consequences of lying to each other, and then there is so much to dissect in this book. And first and foremost, it starts with this group of friends. There's a massive party happening at someone's house. They're having a great night out. But then it gets out of control. It's people in their mid-30s, all with kids, who are having the chance to let loose and have a good time. But then when Natalie, it was her birthday in the start of the book, wakes up, she discovers the following day that one of her children who has a pill in their mouth, and a quarter of the pill is missing. We do not know what this pill is. Immediately, the kid is taken to hospital and turns out okay. But this entire situation creates a chain reaction within the community. And the whole premise and initial reaction is people saying, how could a mother let this happen to their child? So it's a deep dive examination into the pressure that is placed on women, particularly around parenting. But also all of her best friends, Mandy and Lisa, are also dealing with repercussions of their own from this party. It is a fantastic and brilliant and loaded examination into, suburban life, the challenges that you have with parenting. But also, I think ultimately it's a realization as well about realizing what you do have and versus what you don't have, because there's a lot of comparison between these people as well. And I love books that hit you across the face, like get you right into it. So this was absolutely my jam.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Katie is a very adept writer, and this book really just threw you straight into the action and really, I think, challenged everyone to think, what would you do in that situation? Like obviously as a mother, I would be horrified if somebody who was in my home had bought, some drugs along to the house and, one of my children picked that up, horrified. But also there's sort of, the fallout of that for Natalie, in terms of her social standing, not only amongst her friends, but also, the school community that she was part of, the judgment that she faced, and the backlash was just awful. And, what would we do in that scenario? I don't know. I really don't know. So it was very, very interesting reading and a very satisfying read, I have to say.
It talked about stuff that I think needed to be talked about, particularly because we've got a generation of people who've grown up on the internet who are now all having kids and learning about this kind of environment and challenges. It's a great book. I think it's been getting a lot of acclaim, and I think with good reason. And it's a great deep dive into parenting and the challenges of being a mum.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more. And the fact that it's set in my local area where I live just sort of gave it bonus points for me. I absolutely adore this. I adore books where I can recognise the setting and I can go, oh, I've been there. I've been down there. And oh, I've been down there. And you can almost imagine the characters walking alongside you. That's it's a thrill for me to read books like that. So, yeah, bonus points to Katie for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing as well is that because there's so many different characters also getting across, they're also dealing with their own issues, either around parenting or being a woman. It makes it even more fascinating and gives you that amazing contrast. So Yeah, great
Absolutely.
book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my second book is a book that's only recently been launched, and it's called Solo Mum by Choice by Lorena Oates. Now, it's published by Hawkeye Publishing, and this is not a fiction book, it's a memoir, and essentially it is a book which details Lorena's decision to become a solo mum by choice by having IVF in order to conceive her daughter. And I think, talking about parenting, I think this is a book that really makes you face, that whole age old question about whether or not, as a single person, you bring a child into the world and what kind of world you're bringing them into. All the decisions all those sort of things that Lorena had to think about in terms of deciding to go down this route when she was, already in her 40s. I found so incredibly fascinating and moving. And she went through, I think, something like 13 rounds of IVF to conceive her daughter. And the emotional, the physical, the financial toll that process took on her, the support that she needed. It all just makes for an incredibly emotional and beautiful read. And I was so very honoured to be at her book launch last Sunday, and to see her surrounded by the people that supported her during that journey, in particular her beautiful parents, and to see her beautiful daughter, running around at the centre was just gorgeous. This is a beautiful, beautiful story, an ultimately hopeful story, obviously, because Lorena ended up with a beautiful daughter. But it also enables people to sort of understand, the choice that she made and the thinking along the lines, throughout that whole journey, even though she hates the word journey. There's really no other way to describe it, but such an incredibly vulnerable and honest read. I absolutely adored it, and I hope other readers will too.
I'm so glad that there are books like this out there. Not just, I've had, several friends who've gone the IVF route, and it is intense and expensive and traumatic and difficult, particularly if you have, if the first round doesn't work, and it puts the pressure and the intensity that you feel on it. So I'm glad that there's a book out there. And I'm also, I know that, solo mums, people choosing to have IVF as a solo mum is becoming increasingly common. I see this kind of book as really smashing some stereotypes about the idea of family, which I think is really, really something that needs to happen. And I think it's great that Lorene. I can imagine it would have been such a difficult book to write and put onto the page, but I'm glad that a book like this exists, because it really, it opens up the idea of having a family, and it opens up the idea and the challenges that come with it, but also the intense joy that is also part of it.
Indeed, an absolutely stunning read.
It's good that you mentioned Lorena Oates, because as part of the show that I do, I always often like to ask authors who appear on the show, what books they've been reading and they've been enjoying. And Solo Mum by Choice was actually recommended to me by my last recommendation, who literally was just on the show at the time of me recording earlier this week, and that is Melissa Sharman. And I love that you and I both went with a memoir for our second pick. Melissa's book, The Beauty of Broken Things, is, Melissa's story is incredible. She is a woman who has overcome incredible adversity. So she grew up in an incredibly religious family. At one point in her, when she was a teenager, she actually was assaulted by Brett Cowan, the man who would actually go on to murder Daniel Morecambe, which was a very, intense part of, just imagining that, being in that situation is incredible. And then she also dealt with a very abusive relationship for over a decade of her life. And this story, but this is not a sad book. while it comes with a lot of trigger warnings, this is not a sad story, and I really need to kind of push this from chatting with her. Melissa has turned this and these challenges and done something amazing with her life. So she founded Egg Donation Australia, kind of off the back of IVF. She had, many of her friends struggled with IVF, and so she decided to found Egg Donation Australia. She has helped bring in 23 children into the world, either through egg donation or surrogacy of her own, herself, for 14 families. She helped change legislation in Queensland Parliament around domestic violence laws, and through submitting a petition that received over 100,000 signatures. She currently works at a women's refuge as well. This woman has turned the challenges of her life and spun it into doing incredible good in the world. And her memoir, again, touching on the theme of the beauty of broken things, she has taken the life that she had, which kind of really broke her down, and made something wonderful out of it. And it is an intense read. It is a hard read. It comes with a lot of warnings, but I think it's a read that you should read at least once, because it highlights what you can actually accomplish and how strong and resilient the human spirit can be. This book floored me. Absolutely floored me, Claudine. It was amazing.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I have Melissa's book right here in front of me, and I'm desperate to get to it. I'm desperate to read it. Not just because it deals with hard themes, but because of the woman that she is, and the woman, the strength of character and of determination that she had in order to be able to write her story. And she's, and to see it through to publication as well is incredible. I'm very much looking forward to reading her story. I found it very interesting, Nick, that we've chosen debuts by women. Both of our choices are women. I mean, I read a lot. Most of the books that I read are written by women, and I don't know why that is. It's mostly what's sent to me, or mostly what's pitched to me, mostly what I gravitate towards. So I found your choices really inspiring.
Well, for me, I think, those are the books that have. I mean, I've enjoyed every book that's come through the show this year. I've been very lucky to have either, books from small publishing houses all the way to your big ones. I think when I kind of just thought about this question when we talked about debuts to bring, these ones, I think the great thing about doing the show is that it means I would tackle genres and stuff that previously I wouldn't have, which is why I've, over the last 12 to 18 months really gained a new appreciation for stuff like romance and fantasy, which is something I've traditionally found hard to get into. I love books that hit me across the face and really hold me. And these two books in particular did. There's so many great female writers out there, which I absolutely love. And that's not to say that, if there's not amazing male writers out there too. There definitely are. Of course. But these two, they touched and gave me the chance to learn about things that I'm glad I learnt about, I think. And it's something, I think they made me walk a mile in their shoes, which I loved. And I'm glad that I went on that journey. Thank you for listening to Date with a Debut. This episode is part one of a two-part discussion I had with Claudine Tinellis, hosts of Talking Aussie Books. Tune back in on Thursday, July 2nd, as we discuss the challenges debut authors face in 2026, and then both face a round of rapid-fire questions. I'll see you then, and if you haven't already, check out Claudine's podcast, Talking Aussie Books, in the description. Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production, recorded and edited on the lands of the Awabakal people.